Hmm. So,
Can you hear me?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
You are audible. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, good afternoon to those who are in the hall and those who are joining this conversation of online. So, we are very privileged to have Professor Nishit Prakash from Northeastern University, and he is mostly engaged in issues related to study of labor households in conflict network, and that of course brings him to the very fundamental issue that we are facing in the world today globally on the issue of gender disparity, empowerment of women, and the role of education. So it's a privilege for me to have him as the keynote speaker to deliver his arguments and experiences, share his experiences on these issues. So I don't want to take much time. Just to formalize the whole thing, I would like to let the speaker know that we will give him around 35 to 40 minutes to complete his presentation, and then we'll have some questions from the participants both online and offline. So over to you, Professor Prakash. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I would have loved to be there in person. In fact, I was in Delhi only a few days back, so it's a missed opportunity for me. But nonetheless, let me try to do justice online. Uh, you can see my screen, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay. So this meeting is recorded. Okay. So this is I'll try to I might need to rush because I wasn't aware I have around 30-35 minutes. So I'll get to the gist of the talk and skip some of the details which might or might not be necessary. So again, once again, thank you for having me. This is a joint work with several co-authors, so I didn't kind of list each one of them. And this is a work that I have been doing for over 10 years or so. Probably I started back in 2007, 2008. And this has taken a form of kind of, I would say, an agenda rather than a question or a paper itself. Um, I believe that the audience is pretty mixed in terms of young scholars, faculty. So I'll kind of like go over not just what I do or what I find, but also a bit about how this work started. Uh, and feel free to interrupt in any time. It means this is not. Give me 1 second. It's not changing. Okay, I can use this. Okay. So sorry for the. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is kind of a talk or lecture that I first gave at IIT Kanpur this year. I spent a lot of time working on these slides, and when I was asked for this lecture, I felt this might be not just interesting, but maybe useful to share among younger scholars. So this is something I started back in 2008. And the research focused on enhancing the well-being of adolescent girls through education and empowerment. And I started this work from Bihar, which is also my home state. Then we did some work in Zambia. Then the work has been scaled up in 6 countries, and I'm already thinking about a new work in India. So, what's the outline? So, there's a lot to talk, and I'll try to, I don't know, like maybe I'll have to skip a few things, but I want to give you a bit about how the work started, results from the 3 papers, and what I'm trying to do next. So the first paper is about cycling to school, which is the work in India. Then the second paper is about Wheels of Change, which is in Zambia. And then we have another work which we already have a rough draft, which is about what we call as the empowerment paradox. And we'll talk about what it means, and then starting some new work. So this is the first paper, and just a little bit about the background, which I'll try to skip, uh, 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 or I'll try to be a little quicker. This is a program that is quite popular, and a lot of people know about the program. It's called Mukhyamantri Balika Cycle Yojana, which was implemented in 2006, became hugely popular, and has been now also copied in other places. Now the question, like as a young researcher, I graduated in 2008, and a lot of time we spent time thinking, how did you come up with a research question? And here I did there's no effort on my side. This is something that was done by the Chief Minister Nitish Kumar, which is it was one of his idea that how do you empower girls, or how do you send girls to school, especially after the middle school when the dropout is high. And from my point of view, I thought this is a very interesting policy. And it's usually I recommend young researchers to keep track of what you read in the newspaper, especially when it comes to policy changes, because that provides you, like I would say, to me, it has always been helpful because I get some ideas from that. And it was an exciting policy in my home state. I did think that this would have a large policy ramification in terms of reducing gender gap and beyond, which is kind of what sparked my interest in this. And little bit, when you are a young researcher with kind of no permanent job, it's pretty hard to raise money to do research. And but when it came to this paper, I did spend a lot of time collecting official documents, which is to better understand the policy. Again, something that I would encourage. Many times we are always in a rush that let's try to get the data, run the regression, see what we find, and miss a very crucial part, which is about what are the nuances of the policies. So this is something useful that I find this to be a very crucial input, and I recommend people to do this. At least when it came to me, it helped me understand the nuances of the policy, which ended up being very useful when I started thinking about the identification strategy. So any research has a lot of roadblocks, and I'm sure that you can relate to that. You need data for most empirical paper. In this case, there was no data. For example, when you think about the timing, there's no national sample survey, or at least I wasn't aware of any data set that was available. There was administrative data, which we could have used, but you need money to collect the data, and you need to kind of think through the kind of empirical strategy. So while I was thinking about this, when I was visiting faculty at Ohio University in the US, I realized that there's no way I could raise this money to undertake this work. So basically, I stopped. And then in 2009-10, I was visiting faculty at Dartmouth, and I ran into Asim Khwaja, who's a professor at Kennedy School, and he kind of helped me connect with the International Growth Center. I don't know, like I think many researchers in India and outside have taken advantage of IGC's presence in terms of applying for grants. And this is kind of how it started. I got invited to this conference, which was in Bihar, where the he's Mr. Sushil Modi passed away recently, but he encouraged researchers to study this program. So during the conference, he said that economists who are here should study this program. We think it has been very successful, and that prompted, I guess, reignited my interest. So, something to keep in mind is, this was not a experiment, right? This is a natural experiment which was rolled out in the entire state. And to think about the causal effect or think about what are the challenges in identifying the causal effect, it's not very straightforward. And in some sense, when I look back, at least if you don't think through the entire step, these research papers have lower probability of getting published in a very, very, very top place. So I knew very little about how things work, which actually was helpful because I did not think through the entire process. But I do encourage others to do that. I would say, although it worked out for me, but maybe it was a mistake to not think through this. So and just to sum up, following passion is great, but it's really important to think through these things. And at least one aspect that I encourage, not just my student, but even myself, is think about the entire stage of a paper before you start working on it. So for example, when you think of an idea, go to people who know about the topic, seek suggestions from advisors. You can potentially reach out to researchers who work on this topic. I get emails and I try to respond to all emails, but the idea is if you can catch hold of someone who can tell you what they think of the paper or what they think of the idea, I think it's a good idea. Know the entire process in advance and then go back and think that, is it worth doing? Is this a paper that's worth doing for yourself? So having said this, we got this grant from International Growth Center, and that's how this started. And it was amazing because it was a fairly large amount for me. It was one of my first grant. There's a steep learning curve, especially when it comes to grant writing. But to me, it turned out to be a very useful exercise because this is not something that I was aware of, how to write grants, and I learned lots of skills. So let's get to the paper. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the paper before, but this is an old paper. This was published in 2017. So I think the good news when it comes to education is there has been lots of progress. If you pick most outcomes, you can start literacy, you can start enrollment, learning outcomes, and attendance. These are 3-4 outcomes where you will see humongous progress in last 30 to 40 years. But what people have, or at least what we still miss, is we see a lot of disparities when it comes to gender gap in education. And there are different aspects, or at least there are different reasons why you see the gap. So this is a good news, but a lot more work that needed or needs to be done. So this is an important policy question. I would still say this is a policy question that many countries are still actively thinking about. And as I said, there has been lots of progress, but it has been uneven. And people have also talked about cultural norms when it comes to education. So little bit about the Bihar. So you do see large gender gap in India. Again, this is not the data from right now. So probably these graphs would change when you look at it right now. And these numbers look much larger for Bihar. So there is a gender gap calling India, but these numbers are much larger for Bihar. The great thing, you have primary school pretty much in every village. Um, and but when you plot how far you are from the school, especially at the secondary and high secondary level, you will start seeing the gaps that these schools are actually not that close, although these numbers have closed quite a bit. So this is, I don't know if this figure is visible, but on your x-axis, you have age. On the y-axis, you have percent enrolled. And when you look at the by age, at age 8, the red line is female, the blue is male. You will not see a lot of difference at age 8, but as the age becomes kind of moves towards 14 and 16, these gaps become larger. So this is for all India. And the same figure for Bihar, the story is the same, but the gaps are much larger at every age. So that's kind of like your first motivation that there exists these gaps by age and gender. Now, this is the likelihood of being enrolled, again, by distance. So I gave you, or what I told you was, as schools are further away, you're less likely to go to school. And this graph pretty much confirms that. Once again, the red line is female, the blue is male, and you will see the gap between male and female by distance. So much smaller gap at distance 0, much larger gap at distance 10 kilometers and 15 kilometers, and very similar story in Bihar. So this is this provided us, I would say, a motivation that looks like the policy that was designed makes a lot of sense and hopefully addresses this gap. So this is, and I would say, an active policy question, because school construction is a great idea. Policymakers should construct schools, especially when schools are far away. But I think a bigger question is also, you can't just construct school and not provide all the complementarities. For example, qualified teachers, labs, and that's where the trade-off comes. So access is great, but when it comes to these trade-offs, I think that becomes the first order. So although it's definitely a great idea to build school, but you have to always think about the complementarities. So I think in the short to medium run, when you cannot find enough qualified teachers, and probably this is not a story that's necessarily relevant for India, but there are many countries where you might not be able to find a lot of qualified teachers. There it becomes very important to think about this trade-off. So policy intervention, this was in 2006. They launched the program. They call it Mukhyamantri Balika Cycle Yojana. They provided cash. I learned a few things during my recent trip to Bihar. Back then, it was 2,000 rupees that was transferred to the girl child, and that number went up 1,500 rupees. Now it's 4,500 rupees, and now it's directly sent to the girl's bank account. And majority of the cases, they do have these bank accounts. Otherwise, when they don't have bank account, they get the money through the school principal. But that number has gone up to 4,500. So there was no direct provision of bikes or cycles. And you can think about the pros and cons of both, because there are other states which tried to, I wouldn't say copy or maybe copy this policy. They provided bikes. So, for example, later on, either it's Uttar Pradesh or West Bengal, they actually provided bicycles to girls, not cash. And kind of ex ante, when I thought about the policy, my priors were wrong. Means I thought that maybe this policy is not going to do what it did, because you can totally imagine that somebody or parents or the school principal or someone would just take the cash and not give this cash to the girls to buy the bikes. So I think it's worth thinking from a policy standpoint. What do you want? Do you want to provide cash? Do you want to provide bikes? Or do you have any other way to do it? Or maybe you don't just provide the whole cost. Maybe you subsidize these things. So back then, there was no direct provision of cycles. Cash was provided and receipts were collected. So this policy is kind of like a unique hybrid of demand and supply side, because on one hand, you're making it going to school slightly easier, and and then other hand, you're conditioning it on enrollment. So you have to be enrolled in grade 9 to get this money. Otherwise, you do not get the money. So there is the conditionality, which is with enrollment, but then you have this kind of relaxes some of the supply side constraints, because you can take the bike, and if there's no school nearby, you can ride maybe 7, 8, or 9 kilometers to go to school. So that's the kind of the beauty of this program, because it has the element of both demand and supply. Now, oops, where did it go? Okay, so these are some pictures which I did not take. The young Abhinav was a young undergrad student at Yale. Now he runs a startup in India. He took these pictures, which is these girls riding bikes, and actually even now when you travel in parts of Bihar, you'll actually see this. So this is still very kind of very common picture of girls riding to school in a bike. So something that's worth mentioning. This is a policy that was not designed for specific caste or religion. Almost, like every eligible girl got it, regardless of the caste or religion, which is not what other states did. So that's worth pointing out. So we had few research questions. It's the impact of the program. Can we say anything about the mechanism? And I would I would be upfront that the second part was not something that happened naturally. As a researcher, I was very interested in the first question, which is the impact of the program. And while I was presenting this at International Growth Center conference in Patna, Andy Foster, who is professor at Brown, he basically invited and said, "Why are you doing this question?" I said, "Because I'm interested in this, knowing whether this program had an impact or not." And he made a point, it was very kind of a useful conversation, because he said, yeah, I understand. This is useful for policy, but why is it useful for us as an economist? And that kind of forced me and Karthik to kind of go back and think about why are we studying this? And we started having a discussion about that. Can you say something about cost? Can you say something about pricing? And we had some idea that maybe we needed to collect this distance data, but it would cost a lot of money to do this mapping. So we were really not like thinking in that direction. And turned out probably a year later that there existed a data set, DLHS, which had distance to the school. So that's how we got the mechanism. And then I'll talk about the learning outcomes. So again, this is DLHS data set. We also collected some administrative data set. So we did collect school enrollment data from school. So we back then, I think, I don't know if you guys had the data or not, but what we did, or maybe we're not as smart to know that you guys already had this data set. We got all schools to fill up an Excel sheet, which is about enrollment by gender, by grade, and send it back to the district headquarters. So that's how we got the administrative data set. And the learning outcomes came from this official data set, which is every student who is in Bihar, especially enrolled in kind of, I would say, government or public school, not private school, because they are affiliated with ICSC or CBSE, which has a different examination board. This is Bihar examination board. They appear for these exams, and we got the data set from them. And as I said, DLHS was perfect because it was roughly 1.5 years after the program was launched. Representative, like roughly 1,200 households per districts, and pretty much it had everything that we were looking for. So we looked at these outcomes, but let me kind of skip some of these things and just tell you the bigger story that when we started the project, we thought about like, okay, we have this double difference, which is you're kind of comparing girls who got the program or the girls who missed the program and comparing that to the boys. That's how we started. But then, this, if anybody has a sense about Bihar back in 2006, 2000, basically 2005 to 2008, many things happened. High growth, law and order was improving at a very rapid pace. Road construction, like everything was changing at the same time. And soon we realized that the diff and diff is really not going to do much. So then we started thinking that, okay, what else can we do? So we have this. Let me show you. Okay, so we have this girls who are potentially exposed to the program, which are girls who are 14 to 15-year old who would likely be in grade 9. We compare them to girls who missed the program, who are in 16 and 17-year old, and we compare that to the boys in Bihar. So that's kind of your first like double difference. And then what we do is we compare the exact same thing to the neighboring state, which is Jharkhand. So Jharkhand did not have the program, so we compare the same difference to Jharkhand, and that's how we get to the triple difference. But let me show you, like, when we did the double difference, we tested the parallel trend. Now we reject. So what we realized that half of the enrollment would have happened regardless whether there was a program or not. So that's your trend. And we kind of, as I said, like we do the triple difference, we test for parallel trend, and it was quite comforting that we failed to reject, and that became kind of the main specification. So if you read the first version of the paper, we have these double difference results in the paper, and they ended up becoming like more like a appendix tables. So here we find that the program improved girls enrollment by almost 32%, and it reduced the gender gap by 40%. So this was kind of the first big result. And as far as the mechanism goes, this is, as I said, we only got to this because we had the DLHS data. I don't think we would have gotten to this otherwise. So there can be multiple factors, and so what we started doing is, if we really believed that it was the reduction in the distance cost, because girls are going to school every day, and if you have the bikes, it's quicker to go to school, it's safer because they can go in a group. So what we did is we first compared this to below and median distance to school. So that's your kind of triple difference. But at the same time, what we did, we estimated the kind of the triple difference by each village and distance non-parametrically. And what we find, which is, this is the main table. So on your x-axis, you have distance to school. On your y-axis, you have the point estimates from the triple difference. And this blue shade is your confidence interval. What it tells you that if you are very close to school, you almost have no effect. So the marginal impact is almost zero. And these are precise zeros. And if it's too far away, it's again, insignificant, but the confidence interval is large. But this is where you have like the big, so anywhere between 5 to 13 kilometers is where you see the impact. So this was, I would say, an important result for us. But as we got these results and we were super delighted, I'll just add the story that we ran into this trouble because, as I mentioned, Bihar also had roads, law and order changing at the same time. So if I had to plot the exact same thing with law and order and um, roads, very likely I would see very similar kind of inverted U-shaped. So we had to rule that out. And this was a good kind of like a very stressful moment because we almost thought we nailed the mechanism, and then we came, or at least we thought of other confounds. And then this was a time when both of us used to me and Karthik, I was awake till like almost like 3 a.m. in my morning, and he was awake till his 3 a.m. So the timing worked out very well. And we had this idea that the girls who are in grade 8 were like one grade below where the program was implemented. So they face exact same thing, right? Going to school can be risky, or law and order would impact them as well. Grade 8, roads would impact them as well. So they did not get the program, right? Grade 8 students were not eligible for the program because they are still in the end of the middle school. So if we find this effect in grade 8, then again, the story that I just told you has a problem. So we ended up testing grade 8, and all the point estimates was insignificant, which kind of helped us, at least that made us more comfortable that the underlying mechanism is reduction of daily distance cost and not anything else. And then we look at effects on learning outcomes, and what we find is the program increased number of girls appearing for the grade 10 exam. Keep in mind that the program was for grade 9, which means that girls who entered the grade 9 were eligible for the program. And this, you can think about this being like at grade 10 level, this is really not enforced. So I think it's a great thing that these girls decided to stay in grade 10 and appear for these exams. So that number went up by 18%, and the girls who were passing went up by 12%. So that was good. Just a little bit about the academic journey. Many people actually appreciated this slide. We submitted this paper to uh, Quarterly Journal of Economics. We got 4 reports. This is was pretty detailed. One report was 10 pages long. I don't encourage people to write 10 pages long report because I don't think that's useful. And there were 2 editors report, but it was very close. And then we went to AER. We again got 4 reports, but they were less enthusiastic. Then we went to Review of Economics and Statistics. We got 3 reports, and there is a category which I don't think I'm a big fan of. It's called reject and resubmit. I usually, as in a different role, I try to avoid giving this category, but we felt it was too risky to revise. So what we did instead is we went back to all the comments we got from AER. We responded, and we sent it back to AJ because it gives you the option of responding to these comments from, because AER and AJ belong to the same, at least they have access to the reports, pretty long reports, and we basically requested the editor if this can be sent back to the same reviewers. So we got 3 new reports. So obviously this did not go back to the same reviewers, and we got conditional acceptance in 2 months. So this is where this paper was eventually published. So now back to the second paper. How much time do I have? 15 minutes? Is it 15 or?
Yes, 15 minutes.
Okay, so we wrapped up this first paper, and then I had this opportunity that of doing another work. This came from one of the presentation. I was presenting the first paper at World Bank, and there was a gentleman from World Bicycle Relief. He was the CEO of World Bicycle Relief, and he saw me present, and he came from Chicago to attend the talk. And he basically told me that, look, my organization does the exact same thing in many countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. Would you be interested in studying the policy? And in the very beginning, I was like, do I want to write another paper? Which I think many of us go through this, especially early on in the career, because unfortunately the econ, at least the discipline econ, doesn't reward a follow-up paper in some sense. So when we kind of ended the paper 1, there's a whole section we had which is about empowerment, and we don't provide any evidence. Like there's no empirical, there's no table that substantiates what we write, but we wrote that section, and it was somehow like Esther Duflo, who was handling the paper, she decided not to. She asked us not to remove that section. So there was this section about empowerment, and if you talk to a lot of people in Bihar back then, and even when I was visiting many schools, it was very obvious that there is a whole empowerment story going on, but no evidence. So I was very much interested in answering this question, but I wasn't sure if this is something I should be doing right now, because I was like 2 or 3 years before my, or maybe 2 years before my tenure. So this is the story. So the story, as I said, the background of the story is more about answering this section, which is about empowerment. That's how it started. And as I mentioned, that when it comes to gender gap, there are lots of barriers, and this one is still about distance. Although the new research which talks about agency, safety, and so and so. So I'm going to skip some of these things and just take you that this program is an experimental program. This is a paper where we actually do an experiment in Zambia, uh, trying to test very similar thing, but still not very similar in the sense that we study a program which provides bikes to girls. We don't give cash; we actually provide bikes, and then we study the impact of the program on actually outcomes that we did not study in Bihar, which is about attendance, which is about empowerment. These are like two big outcomes, and also learning outcomes. So I'll skip some of these things, but this is in collaboration with World Bicycle Relief and Ministry of General Education in Zambia. So, okay. So the design, if I look back, I would say that I think it was a mistake to have this design. We have two treatment arms, and I'll start with treatment two, which is payment arm. This is what World Bicycle Relief does. So this was an organization that wanted us to study their policy, and this is the policy. They provide bikes to girls who are in grade 5, 6, and 7, and they have to pay a small amount, $5 to $6, which is roughly 6.5% of the average rural monthly household expenditure. And this money is to cover the maintenance. So basically, if anything breaks, something happens, they train a mechanic in the village, and they typically are in the school, and they typically fix the bikes for free. But upfront, you have to pay $5 to $6. So this is their program. So we actually discussed many things that could be another treatment, because I was excited to like, oh, maybe we should think about different idea. We also discussed giving cash, which will be very similar to what we did in Bihar. That was a no go. So what we decided is we decided to stick with treatment two, but tweak this where everything else is the same, but you don't have to pay this $5 to $6, right? So we started thinking about like, oh, maybe we can link this back to these papers, which is about how much subsidy to give, or about sunk costs. We had different ideas in mind, but I think when you have limited schools in your sample, I think it's best to not split this by many groups and keep it simple. And one reason why I'm mentioning this, because ex post, there's hardly any difference between payment and no payment term. So, in fact, there's a lot of social capital that was lost in making an argument to World Bicycle Relief that why we should do treatment one. And at the end of the day, the results are very similar. So it kind of didn't make a lot of sense to do this. So this is your two treatment. And they have a committee which monitors the uses of the bike, and you have the standard control group. So this is a bit about the motivation. If you provide bicycles for zero price, there's a research that talks about how it reduces selfishness. And from our own field visits, what we learned is the ownership of the bike is more salient, especially because many girls would say that, oh, when my parents pay this $5 to $6, we don't feel that this is our bike. There's a bit of the salience here. So that kind of also motivated us to think about that. And then this whole non-zero price is a larger literature, which is like, if you pay this upfront cost, you're likely to push your kids to make use of the bikes. So we felt this is an interesting from a policy standpoint, because many times when policies are launched, we always add like some kind of a conditionality, that it could be like, oh, you have to meet 75% attendance, right? Maybe the policy by governments would not have this cost component, but you can imagine many organizations like World Bicycle Relief. And our prior was that we will find very large effects in the no payment arm. And then we'll convince World Bicycle Relief that, what, this adding $5 to $6 is kind of hurting. So although we ended up being completely wrong. So I don't know what's okay. So I'll just get to the results, so these are some of the pictures when I was visiting Zambia, all co-authors. This is with Anna Garcia, Nathan, and Kritika Nerula. We all took turns to visit Zambia. There are lots of similarities. So when it came to the idea about female empowerment, I think the story is similar, no matter whether it's Zambia or India. And although I would say the schools seems to be in a much better shape in Zambia, at least as compared to Bihar back then. So this person is a school mechanic, and this is a mechanic who kind of typically fixes the bike. And what I'm going to show you is show you results by the two treatment arm, but also show you together. So some things to worth noticing. I don't know. To us, it was very striking that roughly in our sample, it takes 110 minutes one way to go to school. So that's a huge number. So almost 2 hours to go to school one way. Majority of them walk to school. So 98% of the girls in our sample walk to school. 27% walk alone, and the sexual harassment is quite high. That's roughly 35% of the girls who walk to the school are sexually harassed by boys. And absenteeism and days arrival, these are like two big things. So number of days absent from the school in last week is 0.88, and number of days arrived late. So punctuality is a very, very big problem in Zambia because these girls take much, much longer time to come to school. It's 2.61, and pretty low learning outcomes. So this is the first set of results. So did the bike that we provided barriers, alleviate barriers to human capital? So the first column is access. So this is very mechanical. So if you give bike to the girl, is it sticking? And the answer is yes. Did it reduce time to school? So this went down by around 35 minutes one way. So this is roughly 33% reduction in time travel. Safety improved by 35%. And what we do is we kind of have this index of safety divided into how many times are you teased on your way to school and how many times did you miss school because of safety concerns. So both these numbers are kind of very encouraging. It's 21% reduction in teased, 38% reduction in missed school due to safety reasons. And as you can see, we do not see any difference between the payment arm and the no payment arm, which at least not for this particular outcome, because for this, these are more mechanical in some sense. I was not expecting a difference between the two treatment arm. But when it came to the empowerment outcome, we did expect differences. So this is like, we also ended up doing some qualitative surveys. So this is a girl in the treatment school. When you're harassed, you can just ride your bike faster because you can ride the bike faster if he's walking. This is like kind of sums up the results, or at least summarizes, or at least gives you the context that what's happening with the safety. Now, this is our main outcome. This is empowerment. And the first column is the aggregate of everything that you see after that, which is mobility, aspiration, locus of control, desired fertility, bargaining, pro-sociality, and self-image. It basically adds up everything, and we have index of empowerment. And what we find is the index of empowerment goes up by 0.12 standard deviation, and nothing happening in the no payment arm. So this actually went against our prior. And we did not find anything in mobility. And what we learned later on is we were measuring mobility outside school hours, because what we had anticipated that these girls would take the bikes, see their friends. But the bicycle supervisory committee were very strict in terms of making sure these bicycles are only used for school purpose. So that's why you don't see anything in the mobility. We have effects on aspiration, locus of control, and this one is very important, the fertility one, because it is the other paper that I'll talk has something to do with this. So fertility has two questions. Do you want to have
I would like you to finish in about 5 minutes.
Okay. So
Because
it
we are
has this
just
question
left
about.
with 7 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So this has a question about number of kids, and then it has question about when do you want to marry. So these girls wanted to marry late and wanted to have less number of kids. So and then we look into other outcomes like absenteeism and late arrival, and all these numbers are pretty sizable. The impact is pretty sizable. So we also went ahead and looked into long-term outcomes or medium-run outcomes, and we find that these effects are sustained, which was very encouraging. So I'm going to skip this, and this is a bit about the story of the papers. So I'll just end by talking about why we follow up. So we decided to follow up this sample because what we wanted to study is those girls who said that they wanted to marry late and have less number of kids, which is typically considered to be an empowerment measure of empowerment, is it what they end up doing? So what we find, so we do a follow up, and we look into educational outcomes, and I'll tell you what's happening here. But we find that actually early marriage and pregnancy goes up, which is opposite of what I had thought, and violence victimization goes down. So so this was kind of interesting to us because we had not anticipated positive impact on early marriage and pregnancy. So what we did is we started spending more time to understand this counterintuitive result, or I don't even know if we it's counterintuitive. So we looked into we this measure of violence into physical, emotional, neglect, sexual, and any. And what we find that the girls in the treatment school are less vulnerable to several forms of violence. Now, this is again, makes us think more that what's going on. So I will just say that we spent more time with the data, and this is what we are finding, that these girls in the treatment group are more likely to receive a bride price from groom's family. So basically, it signals better socioeconomic status of husband, are less likely to fall pregnant outside marriage. So that's quite important. And so if you add everything together, it just tells you that kind of when you think about empowerment, it's a very multifaceted concept. It's very context dependent. And in our context, it seems like this story supports associative matching, which means that this increases in marriage and pregnancy rates tells you a bit about the matching rather than anything else. So this is not, uh, if you take the result that the self-reported girl said, oh, we want to marry late, have lesser kids, and then in the actual you find opposite, they are still aligned with each other. It's not as if they're not misaligned. So to sum up, actual decisions are not in line with the self-reported empowerment outcomes. And is it an empowerment story? Is it opposite? We think it's still an empowerment story because it's an associative matching story. So this is where and we haven't written up. We have partially written up the paper, but we found this to be very interesting. And I'm going to stop here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes time for accepting questions from the audience. If you have any question, you are welcome to raise them. I have just two questions because we don't have time. So these are the two questions. No, just give it to
Hi,
her.
Nishit. This
Give
is
it to her
Pradeep.
first. She, yes, no.
Hi, Nishit. This is Tanu Gupta. I'm a visiting assistant professor at ISI Delhi. So I have two sets of questions. But firstly, I have one clarificatory question on one of your table. So in this Zambia paper, I have seen in the first table, I have seen that the effect size is 4400%. So can you just explain that? I mean, can you just see your first table and in the first column?
Yeah, so that's like I would say that's the mechanical one because as you say, the axis went from almost 0 to 88%, right? So that's why that number is very large.
Okay. 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 So now I have another set of questions which are actually related with this publications. So we have seen that you have received some rejections for some of the journals, but you haven't really spoken about the timelines. So as a young researcher, I'm like really interested to, have some words about the timeline, because when we are young, so we are really impatient about publication. And we all know that the publication takes a lot of time. So if you can,
So,
tell your journey in terms of timeline. And then secondly, I have second follow-up question that I often heard that networks play a lot of role in terms of publication. What is your opinion on that?
can you repeat the last question?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Oh, sorry. What I'm saying is that I've heard often so many times that networks, like knowing the right people, matters a lot for getting good publication. So what is your opinion on that?
So I can answer both, but I think this was an important slide that I skipped, and I let me just like quickly. So this is a paper, with,
Pradeep.
I mean, authors which are not as known as, let's say, others. So we submitted this paper to AER. Within 3 months, we got three reports, one positive and two negative. And basically, we were told that it's not enough contribution as compared to the previous paper. And then we went to which we feel that this paper, goes way above what we did in the previous paper, but that's how the discipline is. Then we went to Quarterly Journal of Economics. It was just rejected in 2 days. Then we went to Econometrica, which was just rejected probably in a week. Then we went to Journal of Political Economy, which was just rejected. But I know a bit about the background, and this is where the network is very important. As you grow, kind of spend more time in the profession, you end up knowing more people. So the background is this was sent out to a reviewer, where the reviewer said that this is a terrific paper and it should go out for full review. However, it was a nice just rejection, I would say a nice email. Then this is probably the one of my worst story. I submitted this paper to Science because I thought that this is a big policy. It has been scaled up in 5 countries. So we submitted to Science and we got reject and resubmit. As I said, I dislike this category and I revised the paper and I submitted back as a full-blown econ paper, not as a science draft, not because I did not. I mean, I think I can tell you that they are okay receiving paper as an econ format in the beginning. So then I got a revise and resubmit with 4 reports. I worked on the 4 reports. I changed the paper from 18,000 words to 3,200 words. It was a lot of work that went. However, I could not submit on time because of reasons. I had flooding in my house. So I wrote to the editor that, this is what's going on. And the editor was very sympathetic in the email saying, oh, no problem, take care, I can empathize, blah, blah, blah. So I thought he was okay if I submitted late. When I submitted late, it was rejected. I think this really hurt me quite a bit because I spent almost a year and a half in this process. I think a lesson is when it comes to journals like Science, you have to be very fast. You cannot take your own sweet time as an econ. Then I went to Review of Economic and Statistics. I don't think the editor even read the paper and just rejected it. And then I submitted to Economic Journal. And I think this was a very conscious choice. One reason being there are people in the editorial board who had seen this paper being presented at NBR. And this goes back to your second question. And I literally, a few days back, I got a fairly easy revise and resubmit. Network do play a very important role. I would not deny that it doesn't play an important role. There's not much you can do. For me, I started my journey as a very unknown person. I don't think I belong in any of the elite category. So if you write good papers, my experience has been the editors I have been still been okay, or I don't have complaints about the network, despite not having any of those pedigree. But the way it makes a difference is suppose let's take Tanu, I get to know you and I get to know you and I like, oh, she's a very serious researcher. She writes good papers. And suppose I'm handling your paper at Economics of Education Review. You send it to me and I know you, then, I think where it does make a difference is about who do you send this paper out to? That's where it makes the biggest difference. And I don't think I would say that I have any
So there are a
bias.
few more questions. So If you can
Okay.
stop your answer, then I can ask the others to raise questions.
Okay. I did start a bit late, so that's why, I missed time, but I'm happy to stop.
Okay. So, Pradeep.
Uh, Nishit, an excellent presentation of the work that you have done. Um, a quick question about, so you talked about a lot of empowerment related aspect as well. Some of the empowerment related aspect can also be linked to access to health and health services. I'm not sure whether, this could be a unfinished story that you have embarked on, and whether you have any plans to kind of look into some of the health aspects or access to health services of those who has the school going female students on their bicycles. And is there anything on that that you can talk about? Thank you.
I'll be very honest. Thank you so much for asking. I had not thought of this, but I think what you mean is those people who are empowered, they are more likely to take advantage of access to health services as compared to those who are not. Is that what you have in mind? Is that what you had in mind?
Yes, that is what I would hypothesize. But you have a very excellent kind of experiment that is on the ground and which could be tested. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks. So you're absolutely correct that this is a great hypothesis, and I think potentially I have seen a bunch of follow-up papers on my Bihar cycling work. So I think you can. I think this could be a nice, or at least a short follow-up paper to test out. But we are starting a new work potentially in a year or so in India. Maybe this is something we can explicitly test out.
Manini.
Hi, Nishit Manini here. Thank you so much for this excellent talk. I have a question which is a little bit, goes back to what you said in the beginning of the talk, which is that you happen to be at the right place, maybe at the right time, that the government of Bihar wanted academics to sort of study this particular policy. Now, from your experience, I'm just wondering, and this might be helpful for other researchers, young researchers as well, how does one deal with governments when there's massive hesitation in having academics on board to study policies or share data that might lead to results that may in fact actually help the government? So I'm just wondering, how does one get past the hesitation?
So, Mani, I'm more than happy to talk to you, online and offline about this. But I think the basic motto is just building the trust. So, I have been working with the police, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, and Bihar. But although the experiment would look like, oh, you got this done in 2 years, but the legwork was pretty much close to 3 to 4 years. So, where you meet, you build the trust, you show that you're not after just writing the paper. We actually care about the topic. Maybe you care about co-learning, and I think once you convince them, or once both are on the same page, at least I have not felt, or at least struggle. I mean, yes, there has been lots of struggle, but at the same time, eventually it has been a success. It's really about trust. So building trust with policymakers and civil servants. And many times we miss this because of the time constraint. We are in a rush that, oh, let's get the data and write the paper. I think that's one strategy that I would actually discourage people to do that, because I think it's very important to kind of really connect, get to know, kind of tell them that why you're interested. You're not just after. I'll tell you this: in Zambia, the Secretary of Education, he asked me explicitly, are you from Yale or Harvard or MIT? He named, I'm like, why is he saying this? And I said, no. He's like, oh, that's good. Because people, his experience has been, they come, they take the data, and they never show their face. So we actually got administrative data for every girl in our sample on attendance and enrollment, attendance register. And that's only happened because he like, oh, elite researchers come, and his experience was not particularly good. And in our case, we did few workshop. When the results came, we continued to keep in touch. In fact, we wrote US aid proposals, and that was very helpful, even in a context like Zambia, where I don't know anyone. So I think the building that trust is quite useful.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, Professor Nishit. We
Thank you.
have gone beyond the time allotted to us. I must conclude the session with a lot of appreciation for the way you have made your presentation and made a very important point that policy making cannot be confined to a particular discipline. It has to be multifaceted, and it has to take care of information and analysis from several disciplines. And that is the most important lesson that you also corroborated to our colleagues at Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bye.